All right. Don't have to push the button for remembering to do video because I don't have videos today. And pulling all this over. All right, you guys, you can see everything working well, yes? All right. So yeah, we're going to talk about understanding FASD or fetal alcohol spectrum disorders as a brain-based disability. I think that when we take time to pivot and really understand kind of the why behind a lot of what we see, we're able to have a little bit more compassion and understanding and support for the individuals and families who we either ourselves are involved in or we may be serving. I am going to do my best to keep an eye on the chat, but if you guys have questions as we go, please feel free to either unmute yourself, join in. I am going to be asking for a volunteer, so just throwing that out there for anybody can get really excited about helping me out tonight. Okay, so who am I? My name is Jen, and I have done a ton of different trainings. Okay, I am a trust-based relational intervention practitioner. I'm also trained in a program known as Making Sense of Your Worth. I have participated in training for facets and circle of security and lots of different parenting type tools. And I do those because before I was a professional in this world, I was mom, right? So this is my guy, Jay. And Jay is kind of who thrust me into learning about FASD and how to support other families because our family was in a place that was really, really struggling. We got lucky. Living here in Florida, I work for the Florida, I came to the Florida Center for Early Childhood, where at the time, our only service location was down in Sarasota, Florida. So I live up in the Panhandle. I had to put my kid who can get super dysregulated in the car for 7 hours. That drive ended up taking almost 10 to make sure that we got there in one piece. But it was a really great experience because I got to understand my son differently after we went through our evaluation process with him. He does, in fact, have fetal alcohol syndrome. And the kicker with all of this is I actually brought him home from the hospital. He was a placement that was supposed to be a favor to a longtime family friend. And she ended up deciding that being his mom was not in her stars. And we had already fallen in love with him. And from this picture, you can see how could we not, right? He's an awesome kiddo. And so we finalized his adoption right before his first birthday, and he's been with us ever since. So we are going to be thinking, like I said, either as a caregiver or a professional, whatever role you're coming to this training to learn as. I hope that when you walk away, you truly will be having the opportunity to think brain. So thinking brain, I really want us to kind of pause for a second before we dive into learning more. And this is where I need my volunteer. Who is brave and wants to be my helper? Don't leave me hanging, guys. Renee? I saw a smile. Oh, you're muted. I think you're
I
trying to
think
help.
I'm unmuted now.
Here we go. Would you be willing to be my volunteer?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me get my note because that's the one thing I didn't do yet. Getting up my little scratch piece of paper here. Renee, tell me, what have you done today? What time zone are you on, first off?
East Coast.
You're on the Eastern. Okay, wonderful. I'm over here in Central in this teeny tiny part of Florida that actually is in the Central time zone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right. Okay, so for you, it's 7 o'clock. Okay. When you left work, did you go to work today?
Did not. I work for the government and it was closed today.
Ah, okay. Lunchtime. We're gonna back it up a little bit. We'll go with lunch. What have you done today since lunch?
What have I done today since lunch?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I just came back from international travel, so the last 2 days have been super sick. So I didn't really have a defined lunch. So I kind of slowly pulled out some boxes from the basement. I've been kind of sick and moving slow on taking down the holiday decorations. So I brought some boxes up, took down the Christmas tree, took care of the pets, took some medicine and tried to sleep a little bit. And then shoveled off the vehicles.
Okay. All right. So where were you traveling? I'm just curious.
Went to UK, London, landed in London, and then went to Edinburgh, Scotland for New Year's Eve, and then went back to London and then back here. Took the kids on a trip.
Nice. Nice. That took a lot of planning, I bet.
Well, yeah, I worked it with a friend, so we both she probably did a little more planning on this trip, but we usually share the planning. But yeah, it definitely took some coordination and planning. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So bear with me. I'm going to be asking and kind of commenting on some things that may seem a little bit funky.
Okay.
Okay. So pulling out the boxes from the basement, what were those boxes for? Was it for the decorations for the holiday stuff?
Yep. It was, I have each box labeled, one for like the tree, obviously, and then different color bulbs, the garland, the ribbons, all that stuff. My phone keeps giving me, I'm sorry, I got to charge it real quick.
Okay. Okay, so we're taking down the tree and you're feeling like you're kind of getting sick. So that post-travel funk sitting in,
Yeah,
right?
it's been terrible. Yeah,
Ugh. But you took some medicine because you
I
know
did.
taking that medicine is going to help you to a speedier recovery.
It really made me feel better. Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And help me out here. This is coming from somebody, I don't deal with a lot of snow. Shoveling off the vehicles. What goes into that? What thought process did you have to do with thinking like, I should go shovel my vehicle?
Well, I try to do it from, top down. I don't want to shovel snow onto areas that I've already shoveled recently, but then I don't want to pack down snow and walk on all over it. So just um, making sure that I coordinate with my neighbors. I'm blessed with some fantastic neighbors that kind of helped me out while I've been sick the last 2 days, shoveling along the side of the vehicles. That way, when I went out to do my top of my vehicle, I wouldn't have to, trudge in a bunch of snow. So just making sure that I'm cleaning off the top and then cleaning off the windshield, cleaning off the front hood, making sure all the tail lights and the headlights are clear, warming up the vehicle, making sure everything's fine with it before I head out. Yeah.
Okay. Have you eaten?
Yeah, I just grabbed something. I went out just a minute ago to grab some soup and stuff, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm glad. Okay, so believe it or not, even not feeling your best, Renee, I am hearing some things that tells me that your brain, probably even more so when it's like on full capacity, that you are on top of things, right? Like
Okay. I
we
try.
don't typically have, I'm guessing that you don't typically have days where things are shut down and you have to pivot with what your schedule might look like, right?
Right.
So you were able to kind of put in the go with the flow flexibility of the idea of not having to go to work today.
Right.
So that was a really convenient thing because now you can work on these boxes. And holy moly, if my Christmas decorations could be as organized as yours sound, my husband would probably marry me all over again. I
Thank
love that you've got the boxes labeled with the tree and the bulbs and the garland and like everything sounds like it's got this wonderful place to be so that next year when you have to unload everything again,
you.
you know what you got going on, right? So
Yeah.
I'm loving this. Your brain is amazing.
Thanks.
You knew that taking medicine was going to help make you feel better,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you were able to understand even like how to choose what kind of medicine that you needed. Did
Right.
you did you need something for this congestion that I think is trying to set in over here? Or did we need something for fever? Like you
Yeah.
were able to plan and think ahead of how this medicine would impact you for later. Did you want to take something that might make you tired? Probably not if you knew you wanted to attend the training,
Mhm.
right? So there's so many things, even with just taking medicine, that your brain was able to do. And then the planning of where to shovel the snow. Again, this is just something for me to wrap my brain around, but like even having the thought process of not shoveling or going from top to bottom and instead of moving from by your tires to then off of the hood so that it just ends up back where you were. And the luck of having these wonderful neighbors. Like even at the end of the day, even not feeling well, even recovering from travel, I think that your brain is going to be one of these brains that just easily adapts, does well, and that when you're asked something, you're pretty much able to kind of meet expectations from others. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, I want us to think about that because we're going to continue to be thinking brain as we go through. Renee, thank you so much for volunteering for me. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to be doing. We're really going to be thinking brain when we move forward in what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we, of course, are talking about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So I want to just make sure that we're all kind of moving forward on the same page. What the heck even is FASD, right? Because acronyms get thrown around all the time. And so I want to make sure that you know what I mean when I say FASD. So fetal, this is something that confuses a lot of people because in individuals like my son, it's still referred to as fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, but he is very much a live living person now. So essentially what we're talking about is just changes that happened to a developing baby um, during pregnancy, while they're still in the uterus, while they are still developing. So it's going to be changes that are impacted and that they're making that kiddo potentially have not the same environment, um, not the same developing opportunities as you or I may have had during that pregnancy time. Alcohol, alcohol is a teratogen, and it is one of the teratogens that is able to cross the blood barrier and actually go into the placenta. So there's kind of been a saying that when mommy drinks, the baby drinks. Obviously, it's not the same levels, but when the woman is consuming alcohol, it does have the potential to impact that developing child. Spectrum. So a lot of people hear about the spectrum, and I encourage us to think a little bit differently because there's lots of spectrums. So just like autism, fetal alcohol spectrum disorders is simply noting that there are going to be some individuals who could have been exposed to alcohol during the pregnancy who may have absolutely no negative implications of that. Then there are going to start to be some with some more mild, and we'll continue up that ladder to some folks who have moderate impacts. And then there's going to be other individuals who have more severe impacts. And we're going to kind of talk about what that is a little bit down the road. So again, just think when we're thinking about FASD, it is a spectrum, and typically no two individuals are going to be impacted the same because we don't know what kind of alcohol the may have been consuming. Mom may have been consuming. We don't know at what point during pregnancy. We don't know about any of the other factors that may be in play with the pregnancy itself. So there's lots of things that go into describing these lifelong disabilities, and that's what we mean when we talk about disorders, right? So it's the inability to function and adapt across the lifespan. So my son will never not have fetal alcohol syndrome. Okay, it's going to be something that throughout his life he will have to figure out how to navigate those needs. He'll never outgrow it, and hopefully we will work to find ways to support him into adulthood so that his brain can be on fire like Renee's. That's kind of what we're looking for, right? We want to be able to see that. So it is a disorder. It is something that is going to be a challenge for him. And so when we talk about FASD, really what we're talking about is this umbrella term to kind of scoop all of that together, so that we have an understanding of, we're talking about this individual who was exposed to alcohol, has got some impacts, whether they be severe or not. And it really just gives us a starting point of how we understand that individual. It brings it back to the brain because then we're able to understand that there's something going on sometimes. And just as a general definition from the CDC, I'll just kind of read this out loud because it is something I think worth noting. We talk a lot about the brain, but fetal alcohol spectrum disorders really is describing a range of impacts and effects that can occur when an individual's birth mother has drank the alcohol. And those effects can include physical, mental, behavioral, and or learning disabilities. Again, everybody's going to be a little bit different. All right. This to me is the thing that really kind of caught my eye when I first started learning about FASD, because when my son was placed with us, we knew also that he was exposed to methamphetamine during the pregnancy, right? Where do you think the conversation went with our case manager, with the people who were trying to support us long-term, with what we needed to keep an eye out for? The conversation was about the meth. But I love this information from a 1996 report to Institute of Medicine report to Congress. And it's saying that out of all of the substances that a kiddo can be exposed to, alcohol has by far the most serious and lifelong implications. But we're not talking about it. It's not on the paperwork that they're filling out. We're not asking the questions. And so I just think it's really important too, to kind of hold space for that. I know there's lots of things that have come out since 1996 as far as other substances that could impact developing babies, but there's no information to counter this. So just kind of food for thought. And why is this important? Why do we want to know about FASD? Okay, research is telling us that this population of individuals who may or may not be identified, it's probably a lot more prevalent than anybody realizes, okay? Back in 2014, there was a study that was done trying to identify truly where were we with prevalence, okay? So a group of researchers went out and they had 4 different communities within the US that they were trying to kind of get a pulse on, right? So the intentionality with that study was to gather folks of varying demographics, varying socioeconomic statuses. So the areas where they were researching was really intentional, right? And they go and they start having conversations with these kiddos, and all of these first graders, right, are potentially kiddos with FASD. So when the study was over, they had identified 222 students of those that participated in the study who had or were eligible for an FASD diagnosis. And what the numbers have told us with that is that's essentially 1 out of every 20 students that they were engaged with. I'm just going to pause for a second and say that again. 1 out of every 20 first graders. Here in Florida, that's essentially 1 kid in every classroom. We also think that that's a very conservative estimate because we're learning that the moms are more comfortable telling us about the illicit substance use versus telling us that, hey, you know what, maybe even before I knew I was pregnant, I went out with my girlfriends and we had tacos and margaritas and I didn't realize I was pregnant yet. Right? Or as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I stopped drinking. So there's lots of ways that we think that these numbers are going to continue to become more prevalent. There's actually information that's on the works that is show we're closer to 1 in 17, but those studies are not quite finalized yet. So I just find this really interesting, right? And this is even not going into any special populations. As a mom to a kiddo who had a really tough time in school, I think about all these kids. Put in the chat box and just tell me, how many do you think were diagnosed before this study came along? I'm going to use this to take a sip of my drink. How many do you think? I'm going to pause because I'm remembering that these messages are going to our hosts. So I will let them put that information out there for us, and I'm going to carry on.
Well, I will tell you that we have some guesses around 2 and 3.
Oh, we've got some smart people here tonight, Kelly. You guys are correct. That was 2 folks who had been diagnosed, right? So then my heart goes to thinking about those other 220 students. What if my son was one of those 220 students, but he was having a really hard time, doesn't have an intellectual disability, and we didn't have an answer to help, understand or justify or think brain on how to help him. So I always find these numbers interesting too, because then, the study that I was just mentioning, it was talking about the general population. But when we take our kids that come from the world of child welfare, those numbers really start going up. Okay. We know that kids are coming into child welfare and needing care for reasons, not just because it's fun, right? Mom and dad might be having some pretty big struggles, and substances could be part of that. So we know that about half of the kids coming into foster care could potentially be impacted by prenatal alcohol exposure to some degree, right? Whether it be to that mild, moderate, or minimal levels. And this is just one of the ones that really get me, is talking about the missed diagnosis, right? So when my son was 5, before we made it to the Florida Center, I was in a really tough spot with him. We were already having a hard time in school, and I took him to my go-to local child psychologist, right? I was like, man, I'm going to get some answers. I'm going to know what to do and how to help him. I'm a big proponent of full disclosure. So they knew about his prenatal exposure. And my son walked away from that evaluation with a diagnosis of ADHD and oppositional defiance disorder. No mention anywhere of FASD. So, okay, all right, we'll figure out what to do with this, right? And that to me just really hurts, because if we can educate more professionals, then we can potentially get families help sooner, right? We can properly identify, properly put in accommodations and supports, and then we can really move forward with intention. And that's really important, especially for families who are struggling. And then also we know that kids in care, they have a higher prevalence because of the experiences of what their families are going through. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and I'm really glad that I was asked to include this, is there's a couple of different ways to diagnose FASD, right? In fact, in the FASD community, they're working on getting a consensus throughout not just the United States, but throughout the world, right? So we can have some clear information and understanding of what's happening, making sure that we're comparing apples to apples. I'll give you a little bit of extra detail about the 4-digit diagnostic code, which is what we at the Florida Center use. One of the things I love about it is that it does use a multidisciplinary team, and we are able to diagnose conditions all along the spectrum. It is interesting to me because recently the 4-digit code was updated, and those who may be familiar with partial fetal alcohol syndrome, that is actually no longer one of the diagnostics, the diagnostic categories out there for that particular diagnostic method. Additionally, there are guidelines from the CDC, which also uses a multidisciplinary team. I believe those were established in 2016. And, oh, I'm sorry, nope. The hang up though, with the challenge with the way that the CDC recommends doing FASD diagnosis is it is only able to identify individuals with full fetal alcohol syndrome. And what we know is that not everybody impacted by the prenatal alcohol exposure will have the facial features, meaning there's a lot of individuals who are going to miss out on an opportunity for a diagnosis if that was the primary way we were doing diagnostics in the US. Not to say that there's anything wrong with it, because I'm all about getting somebody the support that they need. Believe it or not, FASD is not a diagnostic term itself within the DSM-5, which is what a lot of medical prescribers for psychiatry or mental health providers utilize. There is within the DSM a way to do some diagnosing for FASD. I actually just had a client come through who was seen by a neuropsychologist and had an other specified neurodevelopmental disorder. And they were able to recognize that, hey, kiddo's got some struggles going on over here, right? And we know that this kiddo was exposed to alcohol prenatally. So I can kind of put 2 and 2 together. It doesn't meet any of these other things. So here's a good path for moving forward, which is great because that helps that caregiver, that helps that individual or the support team be able to move forward thinking brain. Okay. I will say that there is a diagnosis that is a condition for further study. That's the neurobehavioral disorder. But I do hope that, like the 4-digit code did, that they transition to neurodevelopmental, because I just feel like there's a lot of stigma. This is my opinion as Jennifer, as mom, about the neurobehavioral, just because that kind of sounds like there's some control or, you know, some ability that goes into these kiddos when they have a hard time. But when we think neurodevelopmental, again, just that little bitty change in language makes it really easier to think, this may not be something that this person can control. This may kind of be out of their abilities. The downside, though, of the DSM diagnostic opportunity, though, is that it's only thinking about that one perspective, and it's not including a larger team. I love the multidisciplinary teams. It just has so much value.
Jen,
Not at all.
Jen, I'm just going to pop in here that we did get a comment from one of our participants, who is 42 now, and said that their experience was that they had a very late diagnosis themselves and was diagnosed at the age of 40, because perhaps of some of these challenges that you're identifying. So I did want to offer that up.
I love that. Thank you. I'm so glad that there was a way for you to receive that diagnosis. I feel like it would be very empowering. At least that's kind of the way I felt when we got my son's diagnosis. I felt empowered to be able to help him. So I hope that was something that came for you as well. I am going to continue, and let me go back really quick. The other opportunity for diagnosing within the US is the Institute of Medicine. I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about what all goes into how sometimes I do and sometimes I don't find individuals with a medical diagnosis of fetal alcohol. Not my realm of expertise, so I can't speak to it a whole lot, but it is another way. And in fact, the families that come through our program, when we use the 4-digit code for diagnosing, we actually refer all of our families to their primary care provider for medical confirmation. So, hey, there's got to be something to it, right? If we're telling all of our families to follow up with their providers. All right, so I want to just break down a little bit about what we're looking at when we use the 4-digit code, in case that happens to be something that you have the opportunity to have as a part of an evaluation for either yourself or your loved one. It looks at 4 different 4-digit code, 4 different areas. So we're looking at growth to try to identify if at any point postnatally, which would be after birth, if this individual has growth deficiencies either between the at the 10th or under the 10th or under the 3rd percentiles. So those are kind of 2 of our big markers that we utilize. I kind of mentioned earlier the facial features. There are some very specific facial features that have been identified to show that an individual was exposed to that alcohol prenatally. And sometimes there are facial features present even when we don't have confirmation, which is a really great way to kind of have a little bit of extra data to go along with that assessment. When we do our assessments, we are looking not just to see when we're looking at the brain of, is there a structural struggle for that brain? So whether that individual has seizure disorders, abnormal MRIs, if they've got, microcephaly, maybe different things that could be going on like physically with the brain, but we're also able to look through the use of our 4 team members and we're looking at the function of the brain. We're looking at what is this kiddo's or individual's ability to do, where might they have some struggles, and depending on how many areas of their brain that might be struggling, that also plays a factor into how we do our diagnosing. And then again, we're looking for that prenatal alcohol exposure. For us, we are super lucky that, we try to be creative and we try to have some flexible boundaries with that confirmation. So there's some organizations that require the biological mom to have a written document. We don't have to do that. We're really lucky in that sense. Not all of our kiddos come through the Department of Children and Families with documentation on their end, right? So did the maternal grandmother see that it happened? you know what, for us, that's a reliable source and we're able to move forward. So it's really exciting that there are ways that we can understand whether or not that individual was exposed to alcohol prenatally. And then depending on the way that their coding works out, that will be how we are able to establish what their diagnosis is. I want to just show you really quick. These are the facial features that we're looking for. So we want to look and we measure the actual opening of the eyes. My son has very, very small eyes and he is super cute to look at. When we pay attention to it, it's kind of fun. Then we're looking at the philtrum, which is the space underneath the nose and above the upper lip, as well as the size of the upper lip itself. This is a better example of being able to show you guys what a more normally developing philtrum and upper lip might look like, and versus one that was exposed to alcohol. I also want to say that we do have standardized norms for African American populations. Right now, we are limited to both Caucasian and African American or folks of mixed ethnicities. So that's also something that hopefully will be in the works to give us some more opportunities to take into account where folks might be coming from. And we're going to talk too about some of the struggles that individuals with FASD may have. But before I do that, I want to pause for just a second, because let me tell you what, these folks have strengths. And when we get stuck in the hard of these brain-based challenges, it can be difficult to remember some of their strengths. In fact, I was at a school meeting for my kiddo during his first year of kindergarten, and one of the school staff asked me, tell me something great about your kid. And I really struggled to share that. So I never know if there's another caregiver who's in that same spot. So I hope that this just gives us a moment to think about some of the things that they could be doing really, really well. All of our kiddos have a superpower, right? My buddy is wonderful with children who are younger than he is. Believe it or not, he is super mechanically inclined. As long as you give him the right tools, he may not take a hammer and a screw, but if he's got the right school materials, he'll be good to go. He wants to build houses for people and give them away. I love it. And he is the most compassionate kid I've ever met. In fact, we were lucky enough for him to be able to even be recognized from his classroom already this school year. So proud mama moment, definitely taking a chance to brag on my dude. Excuse me. But there are so many ways that individuals impacted by prenatal alcohol exposure can be successful and they can thrive. So when we find what they are good at and what their superpower is, man, lean into it. Best thing I can tell you. All right, so some of the typical primary characteristics of FASD. Excuse me. We notice a lot of individuals. Oh, let me back this up. I'm going to say I probably am going to use the word kiddo a lot when I'm talking about this. So bear with me. That's just the world I live in. So I definitely recognize that our folks who are now 40 and able to get diagnosed have other examples that can be included. So bear with me, guys. But memory problems, right? These kiddos are folks who you can tell 300 times, and it may take them until the 300th time for them to remember the steps of taking a shower independently. They may be where they know exactly where their shoes are supposed to go, or they know how to write, so sorry, the letters of the alphabet, right? But when it comes to doing, they may have a hard time with implementing that. But you know they know it. So memory absolutely can be an area where individuals may struggle. And it could be too that today I remember how to do this activity or this task or this assignment. Tomorrow, maybe my brain's not quite on fire like Renee's was, and I'm having a hard time and I can't do it today, right? So there can be inconsistencies even with abilities. Developmental dysmaturity is another way that our folks can be impacted. And it's not that the individual is acting immaturely, but what it is that their chronological age does not match up with their age that they have gotten through with development. I've got another slide that I'm going to go into that some more on. So I'm going to kind of pass over that one for just a moment, but just know that they may be doing their best, but their best might not be equivalent to their peers. Sensory. Holy smokes. I did not know about the wonderful marvels that occupational therapists could bring to my world. My son is a sensory seeker, and he is the kid who, walking down the hallway, is bumping into every wall that he can, or he is standing on this side of the room, running across, bouncing into our couch, and then turning and flipping upside down, right? I grew up in a home where that was not okay. And that was initially what, my reaction to him was. When I started to recognize that my guy was meeting his sensory needs by bumping into the walls or coming over and flopping himself all over the place, I got to look at it different. I got to understand what was happening with him, and I reacted differently, and I was able to support him better. So there could be folks who are sensory seekers. There could be folks who are sensory avoiders, and there are folks that can be a great little mix of the two. So it's a matter of figuring out what that looks like. So working with an occupational therapist who can help with identifying and understanding sensory needs is amazing. These folks can sometimes have a slow cognitive or an auditory pace. And what we call that is essentially these kiddos being a 10-second kid in a 1-second world. So when I was asking Renee questions, I kind of expected that she was going to quickly and promptly respond to my questions, right? Sounded pretty natural conversation, went well. Sometimes, say when we don't have eye contact with our kiddo, or when our kiddo maybe is multitasking, then it might take their brain a little bit of time to absorb the information that they heard, process what was said, come up with a response, and then be able to regurgitate that response outward. If I don't realize that's what's happening, I'm going to be like, Renee, come on, I'm waiting on my answer over here, right? But if I know that my kiddo has a slow processing speed, I'm going to come forward with a little bit of grace. I'm going to maybe count to 10 while I wait for their response before I say, hey, Renee, did you hear my question? Right? I'm going to put in accommodations and have understanding to be able to figure out how to communicate well with that individual. I just have to know that that's what's going on. Difficulties with abstracting and predicting things can be kind of a challenge. I kind of use the example of timeouts, right? I used to do timeouts with him, and it did not matter how many times we went to timeout. He could not predict that the next time he did the action that led him to timeout, he was going to go back to timeout. Like that connecting cause and effect. It was really, really challenging. So again, I'm going to get frustrated, right? Like as a caregiver, because why are you not listening? This is not getting through to you. How do I explain this? Then that happens, right? So it's just something to kind of keep in mind, because if we can understand that difficulty with abstract thinking or difficulty with predictive thinking, then my kiddo's English teacher, who they're reading a book, might say, oh, hey, buddy, what do you think the author meant? I don't know what the author meant. He said the sky was gray. That meant the sky was gray. Or the girl was blue. What does that mean? The girl was blue, right? So there's nuances that go into that kind of thinking, and our kiddos may not be capable of that. And that's okay. We just recognize it. So that kind of goes into these very literal thinkers that they can be. These are the kids who mess around and find out, right? If you tell them, go touch the hot stove and see what happens, buddy, they're going to go touch the hot stove and see what happens because you told them to. That to them was a very clear instruction. So that can sometimes cause difficulties, or being able to recognize sarcasm, right? Well, you said. So that context of thinking very literally, I've actually even started trying to use it with helping myself. Like, wait a minute, can you just very clearly tell me what your expectation is? Then I don't have to worry about, am I reading into this? Am I understanding it correctly? It's been an amazing tool to understand. When I can think brain, I have so many fewer struggles. It's really great. Okay. The next one, difficulty making decisions. That can kind of go back into that struggles with processing, struggles with cause and effect. I'm not really sure. And transitions can be hard. Here's the thing too. It could be that little Johnny is going and transitioning from the classroom to the lunchroom, and man, is he hungry every day. This kiddo eats his food. He is on top of things and he knows he's hungry. Like, he's ready to go. But little Johnny has some sensory struggles, or little Johnny doesn't like the kid he has to sit next to in the lunchroom, right? So as much as he knows he wants to go into the lunchroom, he might have a hard time getting there because it smells, or it's very loud and overwhelming in the lunchroom, or I'm just not ready. My brain is not ready to shift from doing my reading assignment to now doing my math assignment. And I love math, but I've got to finish this reading assignment first, right? So there's different kinds of transitions. It could be physical transitions, it could be mental transitions, lots of different things. But if they have a hard time, what I call pausing their brain, it can be difficult to go on to that next activity. Okay. Speeding myself up here because I got a lot I still want to share with you guys. What can happen when we can't recognize these primary characteristics is we often see secondary behaviors, right? We used to call them that are now referred to as adverse impacts. And but essentially there's a way that we don't see that I'm having a hard time. I don't want to, I'm not able to transition yet. What I see is a kiddo giving some reluctance and some pushback about doing his math work. So it kind of goes into this goodness of fit. And so if the environment is supported and accommodated and connected and ready, then that kiddo is going to more easily be able to transition. So it kind of goes into making sure that we're able to put accommodations in place to be able to recognize, how could I prevent this potential big blow up? Or if we know that there's going to be some big feelings about it, how can I make it go from a level 100 to maybe a level 50? Right? And finding that in between those supports that can make those things happen. Those adverse impacts that we can often see, that's what we notice. That is more often than not what caregivers are going to be identifying as their kiddos' struggles. Easily tired, anxious, angry. Oh man, my kiddo would get so angry. And afterwards, when his little brain is able to calm back down, he's able to say, man, mom, I'm really sorry, right? But in the moment, his impulse control just does not allow him to always act appropriately. Some kids just shut down and you're like, oh, tell me what's going on. Tell me how to help you. They don't know, right? Because they also can't recognize their primary characteristics. So it can be hard for them to tell you what they need. So these, though, are typically what we're going to see when we see these, what was formerly known as the behavioral symptoms, or those secondary effects. I love this little graphic just because it kind of helps me to get a visual of what my son might be experiencing sometimes, right? Here I am saying, hey buddy, have a good day at school. I need you to be good. No write-ups today. And here's his teacher. You got to get along with your friends. You've got to learn. We've got to take this test, and here he is doing his absolute best. But there's just so much coming at him and him not knowing how to express, oh, this is hard. Whether it be writing my assignment because I've got fine motor skill struggles, or whether it be communicating to you what you're asking me that the author is thinking, I just don't know, right? So to me, this just kind of gives me that opportunity to pause and reflect on how things might be for my son, because I will never know what it's like for him. I just know from my own experience with supporting him. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm gonna do this really quick. I want you guys to kind of look at this. This is homework that one of our kiddos was assigned. Okay. And thinking about that, what are you noticing in here? When I first look at this, what I see is that I've got a student who when Alex wrote his name, it looks like maybe on his X, he might have been pushing his paper a little too hard. We're working on some fractions and negative numbers and holy moly negative fractions with whole numbers and all of the things, right? But what grade level do you think this student might be in? When I first saw this, my guess was wrong. And I include this though, because it's really important to be able to know where this individual is at, because once we know where they're at, again, we can support them from that brain-based perspective. So Alex is in 10th grade. And my middle schooler is doing math work that's more complicated than this. But if I had the expectation in 10th grade of Alex to be able to function like a lot of other 10th graders, I would not be setting Alex up for success, right? I would not be giving Alex an opportunity to reach his maximum potential because I need to understand where his brain is at. So I can't expect his brain to work like Renee's, right? He's going to have a hard time if I do, which is going to be setting both of us up for failure. So it's just important to again, kind of recognize, because school can be such a tough space for these folks. This is the example I was going to share about how the developmental dysmaturity can come into play. So Alex being 16, I don't know if many 16-year-old young men who want to take their orange little pumpkin for Halloween trick-or-treating and put his big giant panda hat on with the fun slippers and go out when the rest of his friends are going out to dinner. But Alex was ready to go because emotionally, he's not 16 years old. When you talk to Alex and you listen to him, his expressive language skills are phenomenal. Man, this kid has been talked to like he was an adult for as long as he's known. So expressively, he can talk the talk, but he may not be able to follow through on these things that he's talking about. Or Alex being 16, okay, maybe he's getting a driver's license, maybe he's starting to have a part-time job after school. But when it comes to understanding money and time, he really struggles, and he is definitely not with his peers in that. So if he's working a cash register somewhere, his drawer might frequently be inaccurate. Well, then he's going to get in trouble, and then he's going to lose his job, and then he's going to have to go, like it could turn into this cycle because I didn't know that Alex had the capacity of an 11-year-old. So different parts of their brain can develop at different times and develop at different levels. And so this is something that we include just to ask you to keep in mind, right? Like there can be different parts of them, again, that have that superpower, and then some areas that may need some support or accommodations. Thinking brain, right? Thinking symptom versus behavior. For my son, these are some notes that came home from his kindergarten teacher. And when you think about these from a behavioral lens, it's very easy to see how his teacher was getting frustrated. But when you think about these from a symptom lens, it can be a lot easier to recognize that, hey, maybe he was having some hard times, right? Unable, refused to sit. Oh, is he a fidgeter? Does he have things going on? He told the teacher no, he kicked a student. So many of these things can give highlights into what might be going on for him. But what it really was it was making him feel bad about himself when he left school every day. It was making me feel really bad about our efforts trying to help him be successful in the classroom. So I include this just to let you guys know when you have these notes coming home, you're not alone, and they can be put to good use. So thinking brain, right? Really important, thinking brain. So here's an example. Kiddo is asked by his teacher to do something, and the child screams back at the teacher, no, breaks his pencil and throws it on the floor. Why might that have happened? Why might that have happened? Is it a behavior? Is it a symptom? Let's think about this for a second. So could it be that little buddy over here has problems with fine motor skills in writing, right? So he's got some struggles, and writing is really hard for him. He had a hard time sleeping last night. And I don't know about you guys, but when I don't sleep my best, I am not functioning at 100%. So maybe That's why little buddy reacted so harshly to his teacher. Could it be that little buddy also doesn't have the cognitive flexibility to be able to switch activities, that he's not ready yet to transition from what they were working on to this really fun activity? Could it be that the kiddo didn't hear the teacher, right? He was busy and he's focused, and he's got maybe kiddos around him making noise. He got scared, reacted. Who knows, right? Is this kiddo just trying to get away with not doing whatever was asked of them? The answer is it could be any of these, but it's important to pause. It is important to think brain. And how is it that if this is how our kiddo is reacting, whether it be in the classroom or outside, how can we help support that need? Because there's a why underneath why we got that big reaction. Okay, so
Jen, I'm sorry to just bust right in here, but we are at 7:56. So I just wanted to give you a little time check because I know once you get going, it's sometimes, and we do want to make sure that folks get all of the information in the time that we have. So
yes,
take
ma'am.
it away.
Thanks, Billy. I appreciate it. So accommodations are really important. I've kind of mentioned it. When we think about accommodations, we are often easily thinking about accommodations for physical needs. People might need glasses. We have wheelchair ramps. It's really important to think about accommodations for meeting brain-based needs as well. There's lots of ways to get creative. So I throw that out there also. And when we think brain with these individuals, and maybe it might take us back to the memory piece, maybe it might take us back to the ability piece. I love this graphic, and it's included in the slides that I have to share with you guys. And I just want you to take a minute when we're all done and read over these. Think about the person that you're working with, your own self. Where is your brain at? Is your brain like the light bulb that is turned on and working and functional and doing amazing and doing its job? Is it like the brain or the light bulb that's in the bathroom and it's flickering and it's really annoying you, but you're trying to get ready for work, so you're just dealing with it? It's trying to do its job, but it's having a hard time. Or is that darn light bulb out and it is not going to work no matter how many times I flip the switch, right? I can flip the switch all day long, but if my light bulb is blown, it is not going to hear me trying to say, electricity, get through here, please. Excuse me. Check out the slide. I love it. Definitely one of the ones I share with our families quite often. So I do want to pause. If anybody has any questions, I have my contact information on here, and I will stop my screen sharing in case anybody wants to see faces.
Thank you, Jen, so much. I just want to, I don't see any comments other than our one individual with a adult onset or adult identification of FASD is noting that a lot of what you were saying about academic challenges was very real to their experience. So thank you for sharing that, audience member. I do want to ask folks to take a moment to complete our quick evaluation of this session. It really does help us know what content was meaningful to you, what you might want to see, and certainly lets us know how we are doing. And finally, I will chat in again, but have chatted in several times. The slides that Jen referred to, including her contact information, are available on our website, and the recording of this will be found there as well shortly. Stacia, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just want to thank Jen. It was a fantastic introduction, and there's so much to discuss with FASD. So we do hope that you come back for the next 3 weeks, because we're going to dive into some of the issues that Jen raised today, and we're going to do some deep dives, especially into schools. How do we help accommodate them in schools? How do we accommodate them at home? And what can therapy look like? So we really just want to thank Jen for setting the stage tonight, and giving all of that information. And we look forward to seeing everybody next week as well.
I'll add a little plug in for the clinician that'll be coming. Jessica is amazing. I have definitely had some wonderful experiences with her, and she's got some great insight to share. I will also really quickly add, at the Florida Center, we do a program called FASD Forward, and I will share the information with Stacia and Kelly that we are going to be able to open that up to families outside of Florida. It's a 4-week, 90-minute session conversation where we talk about different parts of caring for an individual with FASD, behaviors versus symptoms, supporting at school, kind of similar to what you guys are doing here. If you guys are interested in that, we are certainly happy to help include others from outside of Florida. And also, if you're looking for a diagnosis, we are really excited. We are very small pilot projecting being able to do diagnostics for individuals outside of the state of Florida. There is a fee that is associated with that, but if that is something you are interested in, also please let me know.